1,000 Hungarian Jewish women in this group, and they put us on a train, and they shipped us to an ammunition factory in Germany, in the general vicinity of Marburg, Kassel, Frankfurt, in that area. And this ammunition factory manufactured rockets and bombs. And it has been in existence since 1933, and ironically, until this time, they never, quote, employed women or Jewish people. The workers were political prisoners or men who were Christian men who were brought in from the outlying areas they already occupied, and they were laborers. I mean, they experienced a higher degree of freedom than we had none. But they had some, they could go out on the street and stuff like that. But anyhow, so those were the workers. Now, they housed us into an old deserted army barrack. So naturally, the conditions were, compared to Auschwitz, a tad better, because an old army camp would have rooms for the soldiers. So it had bunk beds and a table and chairs, and ironically even had lockers, but we had nothing to put into the lockers. So we were 16 in the room, and they took us out to a factory. Now, most of the survivors in this 1,000 were anywhere between 16 to 35. Neither of us have ever seen a factory or worked in a factory. But you'd be surprised when you have to, how fast you learn. So what were we doing here? The bombs were filled with a reconstituted powder of highly poisonous liquid material. And once they reconstituted it into liquid, they would have pipelines going through the factory, and in front of your workbench was a bomb, and then the tubing would come and you would feed the liquid into the bomb and lock it, and then two people had to lift up the bomb because it was very heavy to move it to a warehouse location. We worked 12-hour shifts, 1 week daytime, 1 week nighttime, and food again was a tad better, but we were always hungry. I mean, this is heavy physical work. And of course there were the guards watching us and so forth. We are into about 3-4 months of working there. One day we look at each other. Now by this time our bald hair started growing out into a crooked height. And if your hair was black, now it's orange. Your face is lemon yellow, and your lips are deep dark purple. What has taken place, we worked with this highly poisonous material without any protective garments. So eventually it started invading our body. And matter of fact, they needed our work so desperately that we got a glass of milk every morning. And from this time on, they started noticing us, because that would somehow neutralize the poison. I don't have the medical explanation, but I mean, even the townspeople didn't have milk, but that was the only luxury. So if the war wouldn't have come to an end, I wouldn't have the pleasure I wouldn't have the pleasure of talking to you. So at the end of March 1945, our camp leader received an order that we have to march from this location to a camp called Buchenwald. So they took us on what they call the death march. We marched several miles a day on the open freeway, and for the night we slept in the ditches on the cold, wet march ground. That's why I always tell the children I never want to be cold again, because that is miserable. And naturally, some of our colleagues were getting very weak and sick, and we held on to them because the punishment was too great. On the third day, we were approaching an area that was like a farm, little village, and we looked around, and the Nazi women guards were less and less and less. I guess the Allies were closing in, and they were probably trying to save their own lives, going to their own house, whatever the reason. So a group of us, you always plan and think and, everything to survive. So we start talking to each other, and here is this farm, and a distance away, we spotted a barn. So we start fantasizing, how would it be if during the night we crawl on the ground and hide into that barn? So you see, when you are not quite 18, you are either smart, brave, stupid, or all the above. So we did it. We did it during the night in extreme fear. But you see, there's another important thing here. Our self-esteem was 0. That's what they have done in the year's time. They reduced your mentality to nothing. So they find us, they shoot us, so it will be over. But the good Lord saved us, and we hiding in this barn, naturally extremely afraid. And the next day, we look out the little peephole, and there are 2 men walking towards us, and they wear a strange uniform, which we have never seen before. Well, it turned out that they were the 2 scouts from the 6th Armored Division of the U.S. Army. God bless them forever and ever. Amen. So they liberated us, and now we were free. But what does freedom mean at that stage of life? That's a puzzlement. It's a puzzlement because you're free, but you find out that you're an orphan. You haven't got a family. You haven't got a home to go to. You haven't got a country. You haven't got a profession. You haven't got a penny to your name. And the rest, I say, when it's post-war, I always recognize all the volunteers in organizations, in facilities, in any capacities, because without the volunteers and the people who give up themselves, I wouldn't be here. Because I don't care how strong a person is, how brave a person is, you cannot do it alone. So if any of you are volunteers, I thank you. Anyhow, I want to leave you with 3 things. One is, protect your freedom, because slavery is terrible. And thank God we are living in a country where freedom is practiced, so let's do everything to continue to keep it that way. And secondly, and this is for my young people here, think carefully before you hate. I'm not telling you to hate or not to hate. That is up to your conscience. But at least think about it. Why do I hate? Because all the problems around the world, whether it's Holocaust, genocide, wars, it all stems from hatred. So let's see what we can do to prevent that. And thirdly, of course, I don't have to tell this audience, you are here, that stand up for the deniers, because unfortunately, every so often, some denier pops up that the crematoriums never existed and so forth. So matter of fact, for the children's sake, I read a little quotation that I found about General Eisenhower, who was liberating one of the most important concentration camps in Germany. And when he saw thousands of dead bodies in the courtyard and the other ones walking around like zombies, he called his soldiers to the area and told them, take as many photographs as you can, because the world will not believe this. So here's a quotation that I want the children to understand. And this is what General Eisenhower said. I have never felt able to describe my emotional reaction when I first came face to face with indisputable evidence of Nazi brutality and ruthless disregard of every shred of decency. I visited every nook and cranny of the camp because I felt it my duty to be in a position from then on to testify at first hand about these things in case there ever grew up at home the belief or assumption that the stories of Nazi brutality were just propaganda. So this is what our President of the United States says. So I think that's a pretty legal document. So I am open for questions, and the only thing I ask is to either speak very loud or come closer, because my children say that I am losing my hearing, but I am in denial. So.